Over the past several months, we've talked a lot about the new 2024 rules, going through the classes, the Dungeon Master's Guide, the Player's Handbook, and looking at the new Monster Manual. But it might surprise you to learn that we're actually not switching over to the 2024 rules in our current campaigns.
There are many people who are not transitioning to the 2024 rules, and amongst them, many reasons have been given. Today, we want to break down the 5 major reasons why you might not want to switch to the new rules, and you can go ahead and guess which is our reason as well. There's a lot to discuss, so let's get rolling.
So not to bury the lead here, but the number one reason why a lot of people, including ourselves, are not switching to the 2024 rules is pretty simple. They've got a long-standing campaign they'd like to finish before switching over.
This is the case for our Fate of Drakenheim campaign. Our characters are 19th level, and we'd like to give the 2014 rules one last hurrah. This also spares your group from the mental confusion of messing up the rules as they have to shift to a brand new character archetype or brand new rule system in the middle of a campaign.
I think that if you're past, say, level 5 in an existing campaign, I think it's worthwhile to just stick with the 2014 rules to finish out whatever that adventure is that you're running, whether it's homebrew or an existing adventure. I think that it's totally fine to just give the rules one last good run and then move on to the 2024 rules if they speak to you.
Additionally, the 2024 rules were just released, and as with the 2014 rules, it took a couple of years for things to start to meld together, settle, and for more supplements and tools to be released to support them. So finishing up your existing campaign using the rules you already know and love will not only ease the burden for you and your team of shifting to the new rules and options, but it's also going to give the newer rules a chance to percolate. You can kick off your next campaign using them and have everyone start fresh.
Yeah, there's a bunch of new releases that are coming for the 2024 rules over the course of 2025, including, from what we've heard, a brand new starter set, as well as another Forgotten Realms Player's Guide and Campaign Guide that are already going to be adding more subclasses back into the game. I think it's perfectly reasonable, especially because of the staggered release of the Player's Handbook, the Dungeon Master's Guide, and the Monster Manual, which just came out. Now, it's only really now that we finally actually have all 3 of the core books out. So switching before now was completely justifiable because the entire new set of books weren't even out.
Yeah. Now, maybe you're hearing about all of these new books coming out and all of the supplements that we just talked about that are being added in the next year or so, and you're thinking, that's going to be a lot of damage to my wallet. Well, the next reason you might not want to jump to the 2024 rules is because buying a bunch of new books can be expensive, and keeping the old ones that you already have isn't.
Now, D&D is not nearly as expensive as other popular geeky hobbies that we indulge in, like card games and miniature war games. But the books are still pretty pricey. The hardcover books, $50, $60, and buying 3 of them just to have the core rules is a lot, especially if you're going to buy them both physically and on D&D Beyond. That I like to have the physical and digital, so that now you're up to like $300, and we're Canadian, so like the dollar conversion is not in our favor at all. And I think that a lot of us have spent a lot of money on a lot of old books, and it's totally legit to want to get your money's worth out of them without having to shell out another $200 for books that fundamentally and understandably are pretty similar to ones that you already own.
And that is a very viable reason to not want to get into the new rule set. Maybe you not only own the core rules for 2014, but if you own Xanathar's and Tasha's and all the adventure books, and you own a bunch of extra accessories that are tailored to the 2014 adventures or whatever, there's a lot of reasons that you might be looking at your massive, cool collection of books and saying, why do I want to buy this again? And that's very valid. Now, if you are excited about the 2024 rules, but you don't have the money to invest in it, and you're thinking, man, I can't spend that money, do keep in mind that the SRD And the free rules for the 2024 edition are available. So it is possible to freely and legally make use of the 2024 rules without having to pay for them. Now, D&D has always remained a relatively free hobby. Yes, if you're nerds like us, you buy every single book that ever comes out. But the fact remains that if you're like, I would like to get into D&D, you can grab the free rules, some paper and a pencil, and a set of dice. So maybe not entirely free. You might need to buy a set of dice. And hopefully you have paper and a pencil lying around. Otherwise, you might have to spend the few bucks on paper and pencil. But relatively free to just sit around the table with your friends and play D&D. So that is still a viable option if that's all you want.
Now, if you are someone that has a big collection of 5th edition 2014 books, like all the old adventures, all the Tashas, Xanathars, Volos, all that stuff, and you feel like you haven't got enough use out of them, like it's very easy to, if you've been collecting all the adventure books, to have not run them all. And maybe you still want to get some use out of those books. And that's a good reason to stick with 2014. But if you're worried about the backwards compatibility specifically, I would say the adventure books run just as well under 2024 as they do under 2014. I think that all of the official Wizards adventures require some measure of tweaking anyways to get them to run perfectly for your own group. So I don't think that you're really in for too much extra work to adapt them to the new rules. So if that's something that maybe is a concern for you, I wouldn't be terribly worried about that. And absolutely, I think that you can the subclasses, with maybe the exception of the Shepherd Druid's one feature, relatively smoothly work with the new classes and subclasses. But overall, I do think that like there's a ton of people that are still using their 3rd edition books, their 2nd edition books, their 1st edition books, and playing those editions and those campaigns and having a ton of fun with them. I think that every time there is a new set of rules, there's a fair chunk of people that say, I've spent enough money on this hobby to last me for the rest of time. And that's kind of the beauty of these rules, right? Is that they're as infinite in possibility as your own imagination. So you don't have to feel like you always have to be playing the latest thing if you're happy with what you've already spent money on. That's legit.
Okay, let's get into some real talk now on another major reason why you might not want to support the 2024 rules, and that is that you no longer wish to support Wizards of the Coast. Perhaps you are one of the people out there who refuses to give Wizards of the Coast / in my opinion, Hasbro more so, your money due to their corporate behavior over the last few years.
I think people who are still playing the 2014 version of D&D and not wanting to support Hasbro or Wizards are relatively rare. I think a lot of people who really were disillusioned with Wizards and Hasbro with all the things that have happened over the past couple of years have moved completely on from D&D, but maybe you might be in that situation where your playgroup is pretty staunch about wanting to just stick with D&D and they refuse to play anything that isn't D&D. And I think that in this situation, what actually is respectable too is that there's a ton of third-party creators that you can support instead. So you can actually still get a lot of new material for your 2014 rules or even previous editions of D&D, and never run out of new stuff.
And never buy something from Wizards of the Coast.
Yeah. Or you can support other creators, like, for example, there's Cobalt Press with Tales of the Valiant, which is a 5e fork.
There is also Dungeon Coach's DC-20 system, and Matt Colville has his own system as well.
Yeah, and I think that's where you're starting to depart as we get into Draw Steel and Pathfinder and maybe even Daggerheart. I think that's where you're starting to look at systems that are really starting to diverge a lot more from what 5th edition was, with Tales of the Valiant being the closest to sticking to that. So if you're, again, if you're one of those people that is in that situation where you don't want to support Wizards, but you want to keep playing 5th edition, I think probably third-party creators and Tales of the Valiant is your punch ticket.
Yeah.
Whereas if you can get your playgroup to migrate over to these other systems, I think that's a good thing.
I mean, luckily there are a ton of fantasy systems out there, and sometimes I just like playing games that aren't D&D with my group. But We also want to specify here that we have no interest in being apologists for Wizards. Yes, we still play D&D, and yes, we still love D&D. We love the game very much. It's our favorite game. But the OGL debacle, the Pinkerton incident, the strings of firings, the dubious usage of rumors of generative AI, and many other scandals, it is absolutely and completely understandable why one would not want to support the company ever again.
For our part, we remain optimistic that there are still good people at Wizards who are making an earnest effort to correct these problems. And full disclosure, we have been able to work with Wizards in a business partnership situation through our publisher, Ghostfire Gaming. Our books are becoming available on D&D Beyond, along with a slew of third-party creators. To me, I find it very telling that the vast majority of independent publishers who would have been directly financially affected by the OGL situation. This includes Hitpoint Press, this includes Ghostfire Gaming, this includes Cobalt Press, this includes MCDM. All of these companies have chosen to work with Wizards by releasing their content on D&D Beyond, and I can't speak for how that has affected other companies, but D&D Beyond is a massive platform, and the partnership that the experience we've had with working with the D&D Beyond team has been entirely positive, and our read on it is that there's a lot of earnesty from the people that we've been able to interact with.
We have managed to make friends with several employees at the company. They're not the people in charge. They're the people just trying to make cool stuff work.
Yeah.
And they're really nice and awesome people. And the fact is that when the whole OGL thing happened, all of us content creators were freaking out because it felt like the company was shutting us out when what we wanted was to be supported by them. And now it does feel like we are being supported by them. And so that is one of the reasons why we still talk about D&D, because our whole issue was, please support us. We are the backbone of the forward-facing D&D personalities on the internet. And they said, okay.
And I feel as a result of this, we actually now have a much more direct line of communication to people at Wizards. So when things occur that we're not really thrilled about, I think one of the most recent examples of this was some of the things involving availability of the old books and rules on D&D Beyond. We were able to express our opinions about that directly to people.
We had a frank conversation with them about that, and we said, listen, this is important. And they, I mean, I don't know if we made the change.
No,
we were at least a voice.
Yeah, and so I do think that now, several years out from this, obviously it's far from perfect.
Yeah.
Don't get me wrong. It is far from perfect, and I think that if you are completely justified in your decision, if you've made that decision to never support Wizards again,
we support you in that decision.
We do. And so we can only tell you what our experiences have been by trying to, like, I'm not yet someone who's like, I'm burning this bridge down. I'm generally not that type of person in general. So that for us, we've maintained that, but it's a completely fine reason. And I think that there's so many other third-party creators to support. And even those third-party creators and independent creators like us, like Ghostfire, like Cobalt Press, like MCDM, like Hitpoint Press, you don't have to buy their products on D&D Beyond. You can support them through their own storefronts directly, and you should.
Yeah.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, the point of this section of this video is that we don't hold it against anybody who said, I'm out, I'm not doing D&D anymore. And actually, we think that that's a very valid reason to jump ship, to either only support third-party creators or to jump to a brand new system. Monty and I have been exploring a ton of new systems. We still love D&D. It's our favorite system, but we've definitely taken the time to branch out. And I don't know if you can see on our shelves, but we have a ton of other systems now that we didn't own a few years ago.
Yeah.
And we have spent some time playing them. Now,
I feel like we've played more new RPGs in the past 2 years than I had played
the rest of my life.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I love so many of them.
Yeah.
And hopefully soon, You might catch me on the Patreon running some games.
The other thing that I do want to just like throw out there is that Wizards has released the free rules. We mentioned this earlier. The 5.2 SRD has not come out yet at time of recording, but we have heard from Wizards go on the record several times that they are committed to putting the 5.2 SRD out into the Creative Commons, which, assuming they do this, will mean that the 2024 rules are in that protective class where, like, once they put it into the Creative Commons, because Wizards does not control the Creative Commons license, then it's out there and they cannot ever try any sort of rug pull like they did with the OGL
Yeah.
with that. So for me, that I am very much, that's like my, I want to make sure that they follow through on that promise.
And that was the
That's
that
a
was the
big one for
promise
me.
that honestly makes
Yeah.
us still stay here, is because as soon as they put it in Creative Commons,
Yeah.
it's there for
Yeah,
everyone.
I think for me the two big actionable things that Wizards has done to kind of repair from what has happened has been working with content creators on D&D Beyond and their commitment to releasing the 5.2 SRD. One of those things has happened. One of those things they've said will happen, and so that for me is the big one.
Moving on to lighter topics of why you might not be changing over to the 2024 rules, you might just not want to learn a brand new rule set. We get it. After a decade of learning the 5th edition rules, you may just not want to be bothered transitioning to a brand new rule set, especially, in my opinion, one that is somewhat similar with a boatload of minor adjustments. For me, something that was completely new would actually be easier to learn than something that is super familiar. It's kind of like those images with the spot the difference.
Yeah.
And you're sitting there being
Yep.
like, oh man, do they have the same number of polka dots on their shirt? And that to me is actually more stressful. I'm going to forget forever that I can actually take a potion as a bonus action now and not use an action to do it. I know a lot of you were homebrewing that, but I got used
Yeah.
to memorizing what the rules were. So these subtle changes can be difficult. And the fact is that many people stick with the version of the rules that they want to use. That's their favorite.
Usually the one they got into the game with, I think, is particularly common.
We have a ton of friends that
Yeah.
play 3.5, 4. We have a ton of friends that even play like second AD&D at 3. Whatever version of D&D it is, we know a lot of people that play it. And a new set of rules is never being forced on anybody. If you're happy with 5th edition, and you're hearing all of this stuff about the new rules, and it really feels like, oh, everybody's talking about it, I don't want to get it. You don't have to. You can live your whole life the same way that the 3.5 fans are gonna just keep
Yeah.
playing 3.5.
I think this is especially pertinent for groups that might be a little bit more casual or lax on the rules anyways. I think that 5th edition brought a lot of people into the hobby that the rules and sticking to them tightly were never an important thing. And you might have a lot of people in your group that never really learned the rules, and asking them to make minor changes in small ways, or like surprising changes in big ways, depending on what their character class is. Because I will say, I think a lot of the changes come on the player side of the equation. I think that for a dungeon master, there's not that much you really have to do differently than
Yeah.
you were before. But for the player, a lot of your abilities and class features, and those are where the bulk of the changes are. And for players that are going to get tripped up by that sort of thing, it can be kind of frustrating, especially if you know, I, I think there's this famous story of like the play group where, like, finally after 5 years, your one friend finally read the player's handbook, and now you're gonna
Now you're gonna
yeah,
switch,
yeah,
and
and
the
now you
spell that they just
yeah
learned works differently,
that
and they're
they
like,
finally learned how their character works, and now it's different. It's legit. I empathize with this, although for me, for someone who like loves learning new rules and loves learning new games and has always adapted to new rules, it's one of those things that, like, it's like I'm not like that, but I understand why people might be.
no,
Yeah.
absolutely. I eat up new content. I'm a sucker for, like, if I like something,
Yeah.
there's a good chance that if you release new things for that something I like I'm just going to be like, nom, nom,
Yeah,
nom, nom.
I just love learning new rules. Like I find new games fascinating, and
Yeah.
I find the process of learning a new game a lot of fun. But I recognize that there are people out there who that is not true for.
I think that people do find enjoyment in different places in their life, and maybe learning new game rules is not your
Yeah,
source of enjoyment. Maybe you love learning new video games. Maybe you love learning new musical instruments. If game rules is not your favorite thing to do, and you spent 10 years learning this one system, and you're like, darn it, I'm done. This is
yeah.
I've worked and it was not fun to learn it. Now I'm having fun playing it. That's a viable reason to not want to learn any new systems.
I would just say, for what it's worth for me though, if you have never tried to learn a new game before, give it a shot at least once.
Fair.
Perhaps try learning a game that is not in the D&D
Like not high
family,
fantasy
right?
D20.
But I have, like, as we mentioned earlier, you and I have tried and learned a bunch of new games over the past 2 years, and that has been an amazing amount of fun.
Yeah.
So I just want to say to anyone out there that's like, I don't want to learn anything new. It can be fun. Give it a try just once. And if you don't like learning new things after giving it at least one fair shake, power to you. Stick with the 2014 rules.
The last reason that you might not be switching to the 2024 rules is actually a bucket full of reasons that we're summing up in one category, and we might do an entire separate video about this category, and that is that you do not like specific changes in the 2024 rules.
Or the whole picture comes out and you're like, I hate this.
Yeah.
And it's legit. It's a legit reason.
Yeah, if you just saw some of the rules changes in the 2024 rules and said, how could they do this to my favorite blank? Um, then that's valid. You're
Yeah.
allowed to think that, and you're allowed to be upset that, when they made Mass Effect Andromeda, and I was like, what did you do to my boys, my favorite video game franchise?
Yeah.
It was technically a good game, and some people enjoyed it, but I didn't finish it because how dare they? Um, but I get that
Yeah.
mentality
Yeah.
of like,
It sucks when your favorite class done got nerfed, right? Like if you are not happy about Paladin Smites getting changed, if you're not happy about
blah, 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 Rangers.
something Rangers, or Force Cage and Spiritual Weapon having concentration added to them, if you don't like the change to Counterspell, if you don't like weapon masteries, if you do not like the way species and backgrounds work, if you don't like the fact that orcs aren't in the monster manual anymore.
Maybe you just flat out hate the artwork.
Maybe. There's a huge hodgepodge of reasons, and whether it's one little thing or a bunch of things combined, I think don't play what you don't like. Like legitimately, don't.
Yeah, if somebody's like, here's a burger, and here's like one of those mushroom burgers, like portobello mushroom,
Yeah.
and you're like, oh man, this restaurant only serves portobello mushroom burgers. I like regular, like you don't have to eat
Yeah.
at the restaurant that's serving the thing, the different version of the thing you love, and it's no longer what you love.
Yeah.
And so you just go and get your regular burger at your regular burger restaurant, unless I guess all your friends are forcing you to go to the portobello mushroom restaurant. This analogy is going in weird places, but
Yeah.
but that is the thing, is like you might
Yeah.
you might be stuck in a situation where you're like, I hate the new rules, but your group at the table are all like, this is what we're playing. And then you got to make a choice. If you hate them enough to not play with your friends, I think I would probably just play whatever the table wants to play. But
I would too. But I mean, one of the things that we've definitely found is that the rules do mix and match pretty well. I think that there are a few people out there that have this very, very, I would say, rigid and draconian definition of what backwards compatibility is supposed to look like. And if that's you, then I guess 2014 and 2024 are not cross compatible. But I think that they are. I think that it's very easy to mix and match between them. Well, there's some official recommendations on how you should do that. You can ignore them, and the game runs just fine. D&D 5e, whether 2014 or 2024, is not a tightly balanced rule set, and it can endure a lot of house ruling, and it can endure a lot of homebrew.
The, the fact is for me that D&D has always been a very flexible line. You can
Yeah,
bend it, you can wrap it around itself, you can tie it in a knot. It's not rigid at all. And most of us at our own tables play with the foundation of the rules and do a whole bunch of bending.
yeah,
And so the fact is that the 2024 rules offer a new foundation that we're just going to continue to bend as we always
yeah.
have.
But you are totally allowed to take what you like, throw out the rest. If you don't like any of it, don't use any of it, and that's again totally fine. I think that even as more content releases for the 2024 rules, if you're like, oh, that subclass looks cool, I want to use that, but I'm not using anything else, that would be completely legit. I think again this applies to a lot of third-party creators because I think that a lot of publishers now are in this position where they want to make things that are cross-compatible that will
Yeah.
work for either system. And I think that there's a lot of things that are like straight up. I think that monsters are completely cross-compatible. And I think that, even if you don't want to use any of the new player character material in the 2024 rules, I think that you could very easily use any of the new monsters. I think that I do feel that the 2024 encounter building rules are just
We
flat out superior.
we've been using those in our
Yeah.
2014 game.
Yeah.
So we did adapt one thing from the 2024 rules, and that's the encounter building
Yeah.
system. And we're now using that in our 2014 game, and it's smooth.
Yeah. So you can pick and choose, you can mix and match if you want to, and you just don't have to if you don't want to either. So I do think it is worthwhile maybe us discussing in detail maybe some of the more unpopular changes and whether or not that's worth changing them or adopting them or house ruling them. So we might cover that in a future video. But the through line of this saying is it's okay if you don't like them.
And at the end of the day, yes, we are sticking with the 2014 rules for our current campaign. We're seeing it to the end. But Monty and I are excited to probably next year start diving in to a new campaign that's going to use the 2024 rules and just see how they feel at the table. And I think that that's where we're sitting with the
Yeah.
2024 rules. And so the question is, where are you sitting? What of these reasons do you have for not shifting over? Or if you are shifting over, did any of these reasons kind of give you pause when you were first considering shifting over? And have you adapted certain elements from 2014 into 2024? Have you gone whole cloth into it? Give us the details
Yeah.
on how the 2024 rules are working for you in the comments below.
Yeah, I will say that like now we have the full picture with the player's handbook, the dungeon master's guide, and the monster manual out. It's a lot easier to evaluate the entire thing. You get the big picture and decide whether or not it's right for you. I personally do feel that the monster manual and the dungeon master's guide are really, really excellent. And I feel that a lot of there was a, a lot more negative reactions from just the player's handbook. And there's a part of me that wonders, had all three books come out together, if the reception would have been,
I think it would have, because
yeah,
everybody was like, oh my God, the power level. But now we've seen stronger
yeah,
monsters. We've seen better rules for creating combat encounters in the DMG. So those three elements, we had powerful player characters, but then we also got powerful monsters
hmm
and the rule combat encounter building rules. And those three things combined to me actually make a pretty tight
yeah,
system.
yeah.
So I'm happy with it. But yeah,
But again, we're finishing out our campaign with the 2014 rules.
yeah.
And that's the reason for us why we're not switching over yet.
I guess you
Um,
didn't have to guess. We
yeah,
told you. We just told you right away. And
yeah,
so that the guessing game that we were going to pretend that we were going to do, sorry, there is no
yeah,
guessing game. We told you it's because we're finishing our long-standing campaign.
yeah, yeah. The videos that we create on our channel are made possible because we have an incredible Patreon community that helps support our work. We have recently made some really cool updates to our Patreon, including brand new rewards to give a big thank you to our current supporters and hopefully invite some new Patreon supporters. Some of these include early access to all of our YouTube videos ad-free a week before they drop here on YouTube. And we're also dropping every month our Dungeon Dudes Eldritch Experiments for our Patreons, which is going to be a little packet of some new rules material or adventure content or monsters, magic items, spells, subclasses, all that good stuff that we're working on for possible future publication. So get your early access to some cool stuff that we're thinking of working on for our next book project.
If you want to see some high-level 2014 D&D, you can check out our actual play in the Worlds of Drakenheim, which airs Tuesday evenings right here on YouTube. You can check out all the previous episodes right up over here.
And we've got plenty more content about the rules, new and old, right up over here.
Please subscribe to our channel, like this video, and ring that bell so that you never miss an episode.
Thanks so much for watching. See you next time
in the dungeon.